Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Sim and Stitches again. Alright, so on today's tutorial we are going to be making this beautiful high-low cropped top. Okay, that looks contradicting. Okay, so the design is made in a unique way such that the front part is cropped while the back is low. That is, it goes beyond the hip line. So it's just a simple style, and I want you to come along as we draft the pattern for this together. All right, so the first thing you want to do now is to mark out your length measurements. I took all the basic length measurements for the basic top. That is, when you're drafting your basic top pattern, the length measurements that you need. So I went on to take my shoulder to bust point, my shoulder to natural curve or high waist. Then I took my shoulder to navel, and then my shoulder to the hip point. Although for the front panel, I'm not going to be using the hip line, but I marked it in order to differentiate the front from the back by the time I'm done and I want to cut them. All right, so the next thing I did was to mark my shoulder line, that is the back line divided by 2. So I got 8 inches, I marked it out, and then on that same line, I marked my armhole line. So I marked armhole line, and it's dropped directly on the bust line. And then I came down by 1 inch from the armhole for me to have the shoulder slope. Then I went on to mark my neck width and my neck depth. I used 3 inches by 3 inches for this, 3 inches for the neck width, and 3 inches for the neck depth. So then I slanted the shoulder slope to meet the neck width measurement. And then so there's going to be a small V neckline design for the front part. So I marked downward, I marked my 4 inches downward, which is going to be the part where I am going to slant to give me the V shape as I have done in this. So 4 inches by the same 3 inches neck width, but 4 inches deeper, aside from the 3 inches that I had marked earlier on. So I went on to draft my neck line, and then you can see what I'm saying. I marked the V like that to give me the neck that I desire. The next thing I went on to do is to take my armhole line. I'm going to carve out my armhole line, and I did this at the midpoint of the armhole. I came out by ½ inch and I connected it to the bodies of the construction, what I'm constructing of the panel. So I connected it together like that to give me the armhole line. Then I went on to take my bust measurement. Now this is going to be a free top, which I'm going to have to gather at the front. It's going to have a slight gather at the front, so it's not fitted. There's going to be a bit of looseness around the bust and the waist area. So the fitness comes in when I gather it on the waistline. And with that, I was done with the front panel. Then I went on to draft the back panel as well. So I marked my shoulder line, and then on that shoulder line I marked ½ inch downward for my neck shoulder slope, as we did exactly for the front panel. That was what I did for the back panel as well. So I marked my shoulder to bust line, shoulder to waistline, and then I went on to mark the length. So I marked length 36, which is about 4 inches before the knee. So that was what I marked. I marked it 35 inches as the actual length. Then I added 1 inch for the back, for the seam allowance, the hemming allowance rather. So that was what I marked. You can see the way I connected it, the lines together, because I didn't need the waistline for the back, so I did not mark the waistline at the back. Now I went on to mark my armhole. I came down by 1 inch, and then I connected the armhole line together on the bust line, exactly how I did for the front pattern. So you can see that this my pattern, I've successfully managed this cardboard in order for me to be able to draft the two patterns together, the sides facing each other. And then I have my back and I have the front pattern as well. Now I went on to draft the neck for the back. So the neck width for the back, is still the same, that is 4 inches. But the neck there for the back is a bit different. So I marked 2 inches. You can make yours to be 1.5, but I made mine to be 2 inches. So I marked it all the way like that, and then I curved out my neck width the way I wanted it to be. So also there's going to be a bit of slant at the back for this neck as well. So but instead of it having a V line, I'm just going to cut it through, and I'm going to be taping it with, I'm going to piping it to turn the edges for it to have a neat finishing. So that was what I did, and then I went on to draft the neck curve. You can see that that was what I did. I carved out the neck, and with this we are almost done with the pattern. We are almost done. This is one of the simplest pattern design that you can have for your simple top, and the top is very, very beautiful. By the time we are done with this tutorial, you will see that it's worth learning, and it's something that you can also practice. And I would like you to tag me when you make yours. I would like you to tag me. Now the next thing I did now is to connect the length with the waistline. For the back, I'm going to be connecting the length, that curved part, I'm going to be connecting it to the waistline. Now look at what I did. I decided to make it a bit curvy. Yours can be straight, but for this pattern, I needed it to give me a curved shape so that it will blend into the length of the top. See what I did? So that was what I just curved in. You can come in by either 6 or 5 inches from that angle, just that from that angle 90, come in by 6 or 5 inches, and then you connect the lines together. And with that, we are practically done with the pattern, the front and the back pattern together. We are done. The next process now is to go ahead, cut your pattern and sew your top. All right, guys. So in sewing this, I began by cutting out about 1.5 inches fabric. This fabric that I'm using a Duchess silk fabric. So I cut it out 1.5 inches in bias form, and I used my iron to press each half inch from each side inward. Then I went on to place this bias that I've cut. I placed it on the V part of the neck for the front. You remember the neck for the front? So I placed it just exactly as you are seeing in the video. And then when I got to the V angle, I decided to turn it gently. You can see the way I turned mine in order to get that sharp pointed V neckline. So I went on to turn it with the half inch that I have ironed in. Ironing this bias binding for piping makes your work much more easier. So it's much more neat and easier for you to do it this way. So I went on to turn the V part first. I'm still doing the neckline for now. So I turn it from the wrong side. This is from the wrong side because I'm going to be ending the piping at the right side. So I'm starting from the wrong side of this fabric. So that was what I did. And I trimmed off about 0.25 inches from that part where I have sewn in order not to have a bulky, huge folding when I'm sewing the other part. Now look at it now. I'm on the right side now. So I folded in my half inch. Remember the half inch that we ironed while we were working? So I folded it in order for me to have 0.25. That is quarter of an inch. So that was what I had. And then I went on my sewing machine. Carefully, I stitched it with the stitches very close to the edge. Very close to the edge. That is what you have to, in order to give you that neat, ready to wear designs kind of stitch. That is what you should do. Make sure that your lines are straight and it is close to the edge of the seam line. So I went on to do that for the V part of the front neckline. Don't forget, we are starting with the front neckline. And then after that, I went ahead and do the curved part the same way I did for the front. For the V part is what I'm going to be doing for the, you can see now my V is already formed. So I'm also going to be doing the same thing exactly with the neckline. So I went on with the curved part of the neck, and I also did the same. Don't forget the same piping method that you are doing. That is, you are going to be cutting about 1.5 inches fabric on bias. So you go onto your ironing board and you iron in a half inch from the right side and half inch from the left side, such that you have like a bias piping tool. Now you can also go ahead and use your ready to use buyer's pipe, but then I preferred using this one because I want the fabric to blend with whatever I'm using for the neck. So look at that. So I decided to include about 2.5 inches that I cut away for the neck part. That is what we have in the design that I'm making. So that was what I did there. I skipped the line to be about 2.5 at the middle point. So the same way I did for the other parts, I trimmed off about 0.25 inches in order not to have a bulgy fold, in order for me to have a flat fold by the time I'm piping it on the right side. So I trimmed it off like that. That's just the best way to do it, to give you a neat finishing. Can you see that? So after I folded it in such a way that I have 0.25 again, that is quarter of an inch. And then I went on to stitch my neckline. Look at that, very beautiful, neat, and perfectly done. So you can also make use of this method. By the time you are done sewing, your design will come out so beautiful. You'll be proud of yourself that you did this. Okay, so just go ahead and do that now. So still working on the front pattern. So then I went on to sew my gathered stitch. You remember I told there's going to be a gathered at the waist. So I went on to do my gathered stitch on the waistline, and then I gathered it to give me the exact measurement that I need for that part. So now this is the belt. So the front part is going to be having a belt. It is on that belt that I'm going to be placing the gather that I just made. So I went on to cut about 4 inches belt. The midpoint is about 4 inches, whereas the tail is about 1.5 inches. You see what I'm saying here. You can see that I started with a narrow ending, and then I went on and started getting bigger, and that is just how the design is, such that at the front you have a big belt, but then at the back when you're tying it, it's narrow and it's tiny. So that is what the design is about. So I went on to mark where I'm going to be stopping. That's what I did with that chalk. That's where I'm going to be stopping with my gathered stitch. So that was what I did. I did that for both sides, for the front and the back side, the two sides, sorry, for the left and the right side. So after that, I went on to my ironing board and I ironed out the seam lines. It is very important that you iron this out. You cannot tell me you are sewing without going on the ironing board. As you are stitching, you iron as well. That is what gives you a neat finishing. So I did this. You can see where I notched at the center. That's going to be where I'm going to be placing the front pattern and the front piece that I've cut and I've gathered. That's what I'm going to be placing it on. So I went on to do this. I had also earlier on ironed the neck piece that I sew. So you can see that I ironed it. So this is what I'm saying, that is, the tail is going to be narrow, it's going to be tiny, whereas the front part is big. It's like 4 inches. Even though it is 3.5 inches that I needed, I added half inch to join it to the bodies. Now we are back on the sewing machine. I had gathered and I had ironed my gathered front part. So I stitched it together, pinning it from the center of my pattern. I pinned it together, the center of the belt with the center of the fabric, the main fabric itself. So I ran a straight stitch on my sewing machine. You can see what I did there. Just carefully arrange your gathers such that it's not too much on one side, or it's bulky, or it's folding too much. So you just go ahead and do this. right, so now that we are done with the front part, let's continue with the back now. So the same thing I did for the back, for the front neckline is what I'm doing for the back. You remember that I told you that there's going to be a slit at the after the round neckline. So I did the slit as well, and then I went on to pipe the slit in order to give me a neat edge and neat finishing. So that was what I did for the back. Now for this back, I added a loop for my button because there's going to be a button for the back neckline. So I added a loop after I had cut out the piping for the neck, for the round neck. You remember our round neck for the back is about 2 inches deep and three inches wide. So after that 2 inches neck depth, then I added a loop for me to be able to hold my button. So that was what I did in this place. So just continue to watch and learn this. Okay, so now that we have the front and the back design ready to be joined, so you go ahead and join at the shoulder point, just as you are seeing in the video. So I went on to join the shoulder by 1 inch. That's the allowance that I added to my length. So I matched it together, the shoulder, and then I joined both the right and the left shoulder together for the front and for the back. Now, after I had done this, so the next thing for me to do now is to join the sleeves. So I went on to cut out my sleeve. It's going to be a puff sleeve, and at the wrist is going to be having a band. So I went on to cut the sleeve and the band. Now for the band of the sleeve as well, there's going to be a gathers. So I made sure that the measurement that I used is wide enough for me to gather to be able to fit in into a puff for the band. That's for the sleeve. So there's a puff at the top and there's a puff at the gather the sleeve length as well. So it's going to be having a double puff. The sleeve is very easy to make. Now this is here I went on to gather the puff for the sleeve for the band. So that's what I'm doing here. I went on to run my gather stitch. You can see how much fabric I used for that part. So I added about 5 inches extra to the round sleeve of this design. So I added about 5 inches extra just to be able to get that volume and the puffiness that I needed. I did this for the front, for the right and for the left sleeves. So I ran the gather stitch for the part of the sleeve, and then after doing that I went on to stitch my band. So for the band I used about 3 inches. I cut on fold 3 inches fabric, and then the length was about 7 inches long. It was 3 inches wide, about 3 inches wide and about 7 inches long. So that's the round wrist measurement that I needed for this design. That's me trying to gather it to fit into the measurements that I needed. All right, so after I'd done that, I went on to iron the band as well in order to have it flat and to have it in a neat way. So I went on to stitch the band with the wrist of the sleeve. I stitched the two together. So I carefully aligned the puffy part, that is the part where I gathered. Remember I told that there's going to be a puff at the wrist of this design for the sleeve. So I went on to carefully arrange it such that my band was puffy, it has a bit of gathers, and it came out so nice. So you too go ahead and do the same. So don't forget that as much as you want it to be gathered, you have a particular measurement that you have to stop. So you can see what I'm saying. So I added extra allowance to mine. So I added extra allowance for joining the sleeve hem line. So I added it to mine. That is like seam allowance for joining the sleeve. So the round sleeve itself is about 7 inches. So I added extra allowance for me to be able to join the sleeves together. So then I went on to do this for both the front and for the right and for the left sleeves. Now look at what I have here. The down part of my sleeve is ready and it is neatly done. So that was what I did for the second part of the sleeve as well. Come on, go ahead and watch this and enjoy. So the next thing I went on to do now is to attach the sleeve to the body of the design. So I attached the sleeve, I notched it at the center at the top, and I added a little pleat, not too much, just a little pleat to give me that little puffiness that I needed for the top part, that is the shoulder part of the sleeve. So I went on to do that, and then I attached it at the right side and at the left side for the sleeve. Now after I had attached that part, then I went on to close up my wrist line. See what I did? I measured that round wrist measurement, so I marked it at that part, and then I took it to the sewing machine and I stitched it all the way to the length of the top. So I stopped at the waistline for the front. Don't forget that the front and the back, they are not equal. The front is going to be having a crop with a belt, and then the back is longer because this is an high-low top. So I cut out the excess that I have there for me to be able to have a matching and aligning front and back piece. So I stopped at that point where the belt is. You see that part? That was where I stopped. I double stitched to secure my stitch end, and then I stopped. Then I cut off the excess part because I'm going to be taking this to the overlocking machine to overlock the hem line, so that this finishing would be neat and well done. Now the same thing I did for the other side of the sleeve as well. I joined it at the center, from the center of the shoulder. I placed it on the bodice and then I joined it. Don't forget to notch. So I notched the sleeve to know where the center point is. So that was what I arranged together and aligned together. Now I went on to stitch it together to each of the sides, both the right side and the left side. You can also go ahead and do this to your own design, and just go ahead, make sure that your stitches are neat. Now the inches that I'm using to do this is ½ inch. That was the allowance that I added to the length of the sleeve itself. So I added 1 inch, that is ½ inch, to join at the shoulder, and ½ inch that I used in joining the band at the wrist level, so making it 1 inch in total. So that was what I did. and I successfully achieved this while on the sewing machine. Guys, at this point you are almost done with this construction of this beautiful top. So the next thing I went on to do was to take my top to the ironing board. So I'm about to hem this top. I'm starting with the back piece. So I ironed in half inch allowance. That was what I ironed in. So this iron in the half inch that I ironed in is just to help me when I get on the sewing machine. You know that part where it is curved. So instead of using a bias binder to turn it, I decided to just go straight with the allowance that I added on the garment itself. So that's why I had to turn it in with half-inch, and then I went on the sewing machine. It has already been turned in by my iron, so it made it so easy for me to sew all the edges in a way that it was flat, it was not folding. Although it is kind of technical, you just have to be careful as you do this in order not to have a folding or lettuce hemming design. So this is not to give a lettuce hemming, it's just to give a neat finishing. Now if you have that tool that is able to do the handkerchief hem, there's a foot to do this kind of hemming, you can just go ahead and change your foot and then you place it on the sewing machine and you achieve the result. So I didn't have that, so that was why I couldn't use it. Now the next thing I did was to move to my ironing board. So I went on to the ironing board to finish up my work on the ironing board. So I ironed it all out. I ironed it all out. The part that was giving me this kind of twisted lettuce hemming design, I straightened it out with a steam iron. Yes, very important. The steamed iron is very, very important. This is what helps you to achieve the flat seam that you see in all these suits, ready to wear design. So that was basically what I did to finish up this construction of this design. And then the next thing I did after I was done ironing the seam or the edge line, I went on to the overlocking machine and I overlocked the inner seams such that it came out very neat, very well done, very neat and beautiful. And with that, I was done with this beautiful high-low crop top. Okay, so you can call it that. The features that come together to make this top is the high-low part, and then the cropped at the front. It has a belt. So many lovely design in one piece. Come on, I'm so sure that you would love to try this. You would love to experiment and do this. So when you do yours, kindly tag me on Instagram. I'm Sim and Stitches Fashion House. Tag me, let me see what you did. And that will be all for today's tutorial. Thank you for watching. Kindly like, share, comment and subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Bye.